say this or that, and then you'll go to whatever you think is true, this side or that side, based on what you agree with. Okay, it's not hard. You're educated people. Okay, so these, I'll just go ahead and clue you in. These are all going to be related to school stuff. So I want to learn some things about you, and we'll learn some things about each other. So stand up.
Oh yeah!
Okay, so here's the two options, this or that. I'm good at studying, or I'm not so good at studying. I just don't study. I guess that could be Evan, proudly, Darcy, proudly owning that. I just don't study. Good at studying, not so good at studying. Also, we can utilize the middle too. It depends on what it is.
Hey, Kathryn! Y'all come participate!
Yeah.
Come over here!
I don't think I need to slide up the rest of the time.
You don't need to be back there!
Okay.
So good at studying, not so good at studying. Okay, what about this? I like to use colored pens for taking notes, or I just highlight things sometimes.
Ooh!
Or anywhere on the range.
Is there none of the above?
You don't do anything? I guess you can just sit down. Nothing. I don't want to participate in this at all. I don't. So I don't have to use colored pens or highlight or anything, but okay, it's a really broad spectrum.
Y'all
You do a
just
little
read?
bit.
How do you remember the stuff?
Oh, pencil. I love to think of the nuances of the things. Okay, I like to read, or I don't really like to read. It depends. If it's school reading or normal reading.
If it's forced,
That's true. I guess that changes. But well, that's good to hear. I like to read versus I don't like to read. Okay. Good. I like essays, or I don't like essays. Yeah, I anticipated the dramatic. In the middle.
I knew you would put this!
Not like maybe an opinion essay or something. Okay, yeah, so maybe I like writing. Good. Okay, not like essays. Why do you not like essays?
It's boring.
It's just boring. Stressful.
Because I suck at grammar!
Don't know how to use English language. I feel bad. That was a very targeted
I volunteer.
I don't even work here. Okay, your favorite thing in school, arts or athletics? Ooh. And again, in between, anywhere in between.
What if it's band?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure, extracurricular, yeah.
It's a fine art.
That is true. That's a middle ground. I didn't participate in band at all, so I'm not really a part of that. No. The answer is no. Okay, I feel confident and prepared in the classroom, or I feel indifferent, embarrassed, or just generally unprepared in the classroom. It depends on the subject. That's real, Darcy. You're totally right about that. But most of the time, for most of my classes, I feel prepared and confident. I'm feeling not so prepared, not the most confident. So, Emma was Greek is in Greek the one that gets even more so. I'm not prepared. I'm not confident. Okay, what's harder for you at school?
You're a little bougie.
Social interaction or the academic work? What's harder to navigate at school? The social interaction part or that academic part? A little bit of...
Emma, you are so good at socializing. You are so good at it.
But at school though, sometimes there's a lot of politics to navigate. I feel like at school, I would certainly be over here. What was that?
That's the easiest part at school.
At school? Yeah.
Absolutely.
I tell you,
I'm going to tell you hack the system.
My school is full of nerds.
She's definitely...
This is the good part.
Social interaction. Okay, are your friends at school mostly Christians or non-Christians? Okay, do you feel like you have genuine Christian community with them, or mostly non-Christians, or kind of they say they're Christians but maybe not really?
I don't know about y'all, but I care about lost people. I talk about them.
We love a person who boasts about it in public.
That's right.
Okay, last one. Are you jealous of other people at school? Or are you pretty confident in who you are, where you're at academically, socially? Are you jealous of other people's academic ability?
Jealous.
What if you're
if you're just kind of like, whatever, I'm doing my thing, you can sit.
But, like, I'm jealous of, like, the thing I was jealous of is, like, how much money a school at kid had so that they could dress a certain way.
I feel that. So yeah, I think that I had some things I was jealous about at other people. I was envious of.
But I was
other
also
people.
confident that I could handle myself as well. So
That's
I'm
cool.
saying-
You're welcome. In the middle.
Yeah. What was the question? We were having our own little.
I'm jealous or envious of other people at school, or I'm just pretty confident in who I am, what I'm doing.
I don't care.
I could be academically, like I would say academically, I'm always a little bit jealous of other people's abilities. I generally feel like the most stupid person in my classroom, so I'm usually jealous of other people. But I might be more like confident in myself personally. And like, it's a struggle. It's a real struggle. Okay, that's good. Lots of range. Okay, that was the last one. Thank you for playing. There are no prizes, but thank you for your participation.
Owen wins!
Owen is the definitive winner. I'm okay with that. I feel really comfortable with Owen being the winner. Okay, so like we've already introduced, and that kind of our little game helped set up that being at school involves a lot of different things, right? There's kind of the social aspects we're trying to navigate, and also the academic stuff we're trying to navigate. So for the next couple of weeks, we're asking that question, who am I as a student? And as Christians, we live in the world kind of for the purpose of looking a little bit differently than everyone else. And sometimes it's really easy to be confident about that, but sometimes at school, when we're butting up against a lot of different personalities, we might be a little bit more insecure about that. So, do you feel like you struggle with standing out from the crowd, or maybe even kind of fitting in with everybody else at school, feeling comfortable? For some people, it's like, no, it's not so bad. I'm just going to do my thing. I feel really good about what's going on. But for other people, that's really hard. I know I kind of at various times struggle with, like, how do I really fit in here? Like, I don't know if I really belong to any kind of group. So we sometimes ask the question, like, what friend group am I in? And like, do I even want to be in a friend group? What do I do when I don't want to follow along with my friends? Or on the other end, like when all my friends are Christians and don't really feel like I'm reaching out to anyone new, and I'm not really happy about that, but I don't know how to make it better. Like those kinds of things that we navigate. Some other people might just be really lonely. Like I don't have really good social interaction, but also like academically, I find it really hard, and I feel like I'm alone in this, and I'm wondering why God has left me alone, and I'm struggling. I'm having a hard time in class, and it's easy to become full of complaints and anxieties, right? It's easy to cast blame and say, I don't know if you've ever caught yourself saying this, but like, if my teacher were better, I wouldn't be having this problem. You know what I mean? If like somebody else was just better, I wouldn't be having these problems. Or if I had more help, or wasn't involved in so many things, this wouldn't be so bad. So it's some reason, like there's some litany of reasons why things aren't going well. And let me be the first to affirm that like sometimes it's true. Like I have an educator that actually isn't really here for me and working for me, and it's making it a little extra difficult for me to feel like I can be successful. But when we do encounter those hurdles, or whether it's loneliness, or just like I've committed to way too many things, and now I don't feel like I'm doing anything really well because I'm just overcommitted, I think the question we want to ask ourselves as students is, how do we jump over those hurdles, right? How do we find success and confidence in who God has made us to be at school, right? So if I had to give, if you're a note-taking person, not that I'm asking you to do this, but if you were a note-taking person, and I had to give this a title, I might call it How David Beats Goliath. How David Beats Goliath. That's not an original title. I wish it was. That would be really cool. I'd put it on my resume and everything. But it's not. I stole it from some other guy, Malcolm Gladwell. Have you heard of him? Probably not. Malcolm Gladwell. I know some of the older demographic has. You probably wouldn't be reading him, but he's a... Oh, yes?
I listened to his podcast.
Yeah, man. So he's a very like pop culture kind of dude.
You're not old?
No, I don't know.
Not in the loop. He's a guy, he's a really, I don't mean this in a a mean way. Like, I mean this in an affirming way, but he's kind of a goofy looking dude. He just has this awesome, like, fro, but he's a white dude. So, like, super cool. He writes about pop culture stuff, and I don't know, maybe pop culture isn't really the thing, but just kind of common contemporary needs, like communication stuff. And one of his most famous books right now, the newest one, is Talking to Strangers, and it's about communication. But he also wrote, and I know this is a book as well, I haven't read the book, but I wrote the article he wrote for the New Yorker called How David Beats Goliath. And I was reading that article over the break, and I thought there's some really interesting things in there. If you do think you're kind of interested, he talks all about basketball actually in the article, and uses a lot of that imagery and war imagery to really talk about the same thing of how do underdogs kind of beat the system. How do underdogs get an upper hand in business world, in their personal lives, like in lots of different things. I don't think Gladwell is a Christian, but he still said some really interesting things. And one thing I want to pull out from the article that he said that really stuck with me is he said, when underdogs choose not to play by Goliath's rules, they win. Even when everything we think we know about power says that they shouldn't. I thought that was really interesting. And the whole rest of the article, he goes on to kind of explain, and he uses basketball and some stories from history and the story of David and Goliath to kind of talk about that. Basically, his argument is that power and strength that we usually think is what helps people win, that's actually not true. That's not what helps people win. The most important thing in winning a battle or even winning a basketball game is effort, not giving up. And that's interesting, and I want us to come back to that idea. Underdogs choose not to play by Goliath's rules. What happens? But first I want us to actually look at the story of David and Goliath and see if we can find something in there that maybe Gladwell missed when he was making that argument. So it's 1 Samuel chapter 17. That's where we'll find the story of David and Goliath. I realized I was woefully unprepared and didn't bring my Bible up here. Very irresponsible. Negative 2 salvation points. 1 Samuel chapter 17. The whole chapter is the story of David and Goliath, and we don't really have time to read the whole chapter, so I'm going to try to summarize some things as best I can and ask you to read. We'll kind of zoom in and read certain portions of it together, okay? So here's the recap, and kind of getting us up to a certain point in the story that we'll stop at. A long time ago, in a land far, far away, the Philistines were fighting the Israelites. Okay, so the Philistines are the big bad enemies of the Israelites. They're at war with each other, and the Philistines have an advantage that the Israelites don't have, namely a giant named Goliath. I know you know this story. Goliath basically makes this challenge to them, saying, if one of your guys will kill me, will fight me and kill me personally, then we'll be your servants. And then the other way around. If then I kill this guy, you have to be my servants. And Goliath here knows that he has the advantage. I mean, he knows that. He is super confident in his own power and ability. He knows he's the strongest man on the field. He's the strongest man out of these two teams, these two opposing parties. And if anyone comes against him, I mean, this is kind of a bold claim because he knows that they're going to lose. And so the Israelites respond with fear every single time. They're terrified of him making this claim and asking this of them because they don't want to lose. So they go back and forth like this for 40 days. And the other main character in the story of David and Goliath is, of course, David. And David isn't really a part of the situation. I mean, not really. He's kind of around the battlefield because he's coming back and forth, right? He's working on his family's land as a shepherd, but he has 3 older brothers in the war. And kind of the thing you would do is if you live close enough, you would bring food to provide for your family who's out there. Also, in the timeline of David and King Saul and Israel is that David has already played the harp for Saul. That happened maybe a chapter before this or 2. And so Saul kind of knows David a little bit. He played his harp. Saul loved him. So his dad, Jesse, David's dad, Jesse, says, go take some food to Saul as well. So he's around, and David hears Goliath come and make this claim. again, ask this big question, because the idea is, I think, that Goliath was really coming every day to say this. So David overhears this, and now let's zoom in to verse 24. And let's read the response of the Israelites when they hear this again, and David when he hears it again. I'm reading in the NRSV. All the Israelites, when they saw the man, fled from him, and they were very much afraid. The Israelites said, "Have you seen this man who has come up? Surely he has come up to defy Israel. The king will greatly enrich the man who kills him. He'll even give him his daughter and make his family free in Israel." And David stood to the men who stood by him, and he said to them, "What shall be done for the man who kills the Philistine and takes away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" And the people answered him in the same way, "So shall it be done for the man who kills him." So what's the response? Everyone else is worried. The Israelites, again, everyone else is worried that Goliath is making this claim. They don't know what they're going to do because they know they're not strong enough. And they're kind of still thinking about, well, the king so badly wants somebody to go fight this guy. He's going to give his daughter away as a bride. If you're a slave or an indentured servant or anyway, he's going to make you a free man. Like, you have a lot of advantages. The king just kind of keeps ramping up all these advantages if someone will go and fight this guy. And no one wants to do it, and they're still afraid. But David, unlike the other Israelites, knew that God was strong enough. I mean, he's actually kind of amazed that they're even responding this way. Because to David, it's a very silly question that Goliath would even come up to them and offer this battle when we're Israelites. We're the chosen people of God. We have God on our side. Forget the stupid giant. Who cares about the giant? Who is this guy who thinks he can defy the armies of the living God? I mean, David's genuinely confused. This is kind of irrelevant, but it's just it's a thing that I really like. Let's just read this next little part in 20 through 30. So his older brother Eliab sees David and is kind of upset that he's there and throws a little tantrum. And David's response is the most accurate little brother response I've ever encountered in my life. His elder brother kind of gets upset, and it's at the end of verse 28. Eliab says to David, his brother, "Why have you come down? With whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your presumption and the evil of your heart, for you've just come down to see the battle. And David, you're dumb. You're just a boy. You're a shepherd. Why are you even here? I hate you. You're the worst. You're just my stupid little brother. What are you even doing here, acting like you know what's going on?" And David says, "What have I done now? It was only a question. Why are you even mad? Why are you giving me a hard time about it? I just showed up. I'm asking questions. I'm just trying to know and figure out why people are so freaked out about this." I love that. It's just, sometimes you get these little gems in scripture of people being genuine families and acting ridiculous with each other. So his brother even is kind of upset that David, a boy, even has the presumption, even has the audacity to be acting like he even has a place in this conversation. What fascinates me about this whole scene is it looks a lot like playground peer pressure. Do you know what I mean? Everyone else is upset about something. They think it's hopeless and useless. So you should think that as well. Do you know what I mean? Can you think of an example of that in your classroom? Everyone hates this assignment. It's this is dumb. I don't want to do it. But you're kind of I don't know, I think this will actually be really cool if we can research and do this project together. But nobody else is excited about it, and so you're oh yeah, this is dumb, I hate this too. But you don't actually feel that way. So it's kind of this peer pressure of, if everybody else hates it and has a bad attitude, I guess I should have a bad attitude too, or something. But David really powerfully defies that. He stands up. And he's not being a prude or a jerk. He's just refusing to believe that if God was moving and working in the situation, it's going to work out. I'm just refusing to believe that there's no way this isn't going to work out. And so that's, if I were to make maybe 3 points, I want to make 3 points about how David behaves differently. And this is one of them. David knew God's power was greater than Goliath's. Right? That's what we just saw here. David is not worried. He knows God's power is greater than Goliath's. So he stands up in school situations where everyone is being down on a situation. David wouldn't be that guy. He stands up and he says, I'm not really worried about this being awful. I'm not really going to invest time in thinking about a situation where I'm going to be overwhelmed, because God is present and moving and working. Let's keep reading. The next thing that happens, David continues to ask all these questions, and he goes around, and the word gets back to King Saul. And David even has, again, he has the audacity to go up to Saul and is like, I'll fight the guy. So if that's what you want, like you need a person to fight the giant, I'll fight the giant. Like I'll volunteer as tribute, if you will. So he goes to do that, and look at Saul's response in verse 33. Will someone read that for me? Someone who has a Bible in a loud voice. Emma, can you do that? Verse 33.
Yes. Saul replied, "You are not able to go out against the Philistines and fight them. You are only a young man, and he has been a warrior from his youth."
Yeah. You're only a boy. You're just a dumb kid. What do you know about it? What can you do? Don't you see how foolish that is? How naive that is? You don't get it now, but you'll understand when you're older. Have you heard things like that before? You don't really have a place in this conversation. There's no way. You're just a boy. Like, this person is smarter than you, is older than you, is more powerful than you. Like, there's no way you could say anything that's impressive to me right now. You have nothing to offer that's impressive to me right now. This may be just my personal experience, so don't feel like you need to agree with this if this isn't your experience. But I have often felt, and I think it was the worst at high school, where people kind of like were putting grown-up expectations on me, but like I still had all the limitations of being a kid. And so I just felt like, I don't know what you want from me right now. You want me to be a leader, but like I have a very limited schedule. Like I have to do things with my family, and I can't drive, or like things like that. And so like you're wanting to empower me, and you're saying I have a voice, you're saying I'm special, and like I can do all these great things, but then you don't really want to hear anything I'm saying. Or it doesn't really feel like I'm a part of anything. Or in the classroom, like I just don't know why certain things are important. Like you're not communicating with me. I just felt like really frustrated sometimes because I felt like people were juking me. Like they were kind of giving me a reach at power or freedom or responsibility or something, and then they were just kind of like, oh, but just kidding. You can't do it all the way. What's interesting to me here is that, let's keep reading. Saul says, you're just a boy, you don't have anything to offer. But then David really advocates for himself. In verses 34 through 37, let's read what he says. David said to Saul, your servant, when he says this, he's talking about himself. Your servant used to keep sheep for his father, and whenever a lion or a bear came and took a lamb from the flock, I went after it and I struck it down, rescuing the lamb from its mouth. And if it turned against me, I would catch it by the jaw, strike it down and kill it. Your servant, again meaning himself, has killed both lions and bears, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be like one of them, since he has defied the armies of the living God. This is what's interesting. Okay. Do you feel like someone who would usually say those things about themselves? Isn't that like a prideful person? Like, do you really say those things about yourself? Here's the list of things I'm good at. I feel like we usually feel very uncomfortable about that. But David here has no shame in saying, here are my accomplishments. I worked really hard. Like, I know you think I don't have anything to say, but here's all the stuff I've done, you know. And then listen to what he doesn't say. He doesn't say, I'm the best person for the job out of all these other guys here. People should praise me for all my abilities. I guess I'm just smarter than everyone else. I guess I just know more than everyone else. I guess I'm just more powerful than everyone else. You should pick me for the job. He's not doing that either. Read in verse 37. David said, the Lord who saved me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will save me from the hand of this Philistine. If I were to make a second point about David, is that he gave God credit for his abilities. He does say, look at the stuff I accomplished, But he also says, it was the Lord who was with me as I did those things. It's God who saved me. It's God who empowered me in all of those cases. It's God that I learned from. It's God who enabled me to do that stuff. God was with me in those battles, and I know God's going to be with me in the next one. David gave God the credit for his abilities. So do you think your confidence in class would be different if you had that mentality? Like, I think we get stuck into this false humility kind of thing where we think we just have to totally pass ourselves off as stupid and incompetent to seem humble. But that's not what David does, and he still maintains a lot of humility. He says, here's what I'm good at. So like in a group project, it's okay to say, hey, here's the things I think I'm really good at. Maybe I can be helpful in those areas. Like that's really what David is saying. Like it's not helpful to you if I just try to talk good about myself but don't have anything to back it up. Or if I want to be a part of things but I don't have any good work to back it up. I've got good work to back it up, I'll tell you. But I'll also tell you that's not because I'm so great and wonderful. It's God who's been empowering me to do these things. It's through God's help. I've defeated battles in the past and I can do it in the future. And I'm confident in that. It's okay to be confident in that. I think you do better work when you're confident in your abilities, especially if you know that my ability is rooted in God's help and work in my life. So when Saul hears this, he's really impressed. And he says, okay, sure, I guess you can go to the battle. So now we need to get to the best part, when David actually defeats Goliath, right? David actually beats Goliath in the battle. I'll tell you this third point before we read it, so that you can be prepared and see it coming. If the first thing David was good at, that David knew God's power was greater than Goliath's. And the second point was that David gave God the credit for his abilities. The third point is that he defeated Goliath by living into the reality of who God made him to be. David defeated Goliath by living into the reality of who God made him to be. So in verses 38 through 40, he's going to go away with Saul. And here's what's going to happen. In 38, Saul clothed David with his armor. He put a bronze helmet on his head and clothed him with a coat of mail. And David strapped Saul's sword over the armor. And he tried in vain to walk, for he was not used to those things. And then David said to Saul, I can't walk with these things. I just can't do it. I'm not used to them. So David removed them. And then he took his staff in his hand and he got 5 smooth stones from the wadi and put them in his shepherd's bag and in the pouch. And a sling was in his hand and he drew near to the Philistine. So what just happened? King Saul said, yeah, sure, you can come along. I'll let you fight the giant. It sounds like you've got a good resume. Got the whole God thing on your side. Sure, I'll buy into that. But Saul still was trying to confine David to the normal, routine way of doing things. If you're going to fight a giant, you're going to wear war clothes, right? We know what fighting a giant looks like. It looks like this. Here, go do this thing. And this is the part of the story that Gladwell likes best. And I think I have grown to really like it as well. David tells the king, this isn't right for me. I'm just not used to this. This isn't going to be the best way for me to do this thing. Have you ever had anyone try to box you in a corner? Again, I think group projects are a good example of this. You do this thing. And sometimes, I gotta be honest, maybe you're the person in some of these scenarios. You immediately know who the bossy person is in the group project. Sometimes I'm the bossy person, sometimes it's other people. But you immediately know, it does not take long to figure out who the bossy person is who's gonna assign tasks to people. And sometimes you kind of get stuck with, this is not what I really feel comfortable doing. Or in math classes where you have to do the formula this exact way, even though there are some other different ways to do it. I feel really frustrated with that. But there are a lot of other examples too of times when people want to make us do things a certain way. It's not really the way that I feel the most comfortable with. Or maybe don't know how to kind of voice those things to other people. School also involves a lot of comparison, as you know. We compare ourselves to other people, both socially and academically. So I think what happens sometimes is that we wrongfully convince ourselves that if I only do things, if like everything would be better for me, if I would do things the way this A+ student did it, if I would just, let me just do the things the way they do it, and then all my problems will be solved. And then I'll be an A+ student. But is that always how that works? Not really, if they're study stuff. I love watching study videos on YouTube and like note-taking videos on YouTube. I'm like, maybe I can do this. And then I invest I kid you not, I've literally done this before. 7 hours, like learning and retaking notes in a different note-taking style to study for a test. Literally did not study at all. It took the whole time I had to study to do something else because I thought this other person was going to have a way better plan. It was going to hack the system. And I wasted all that time. I learned nothing. I studied nothing. And I didn't do very well on the test. So it was a whole big waste of time. But it was a lie. I believed that I'll be successful if I can just find the person who's doing it well, who seems to be making it in life, and I'll just do everything that they do, exactly the way that they do it. But I don't think that's always the way that works. I mean, David knew himself. He knew who he was in God. And he said, I will not be successful if I play by the bully's rules. If I play by the bully's rules, if I play by Goliath's rules, or if I play by the rules of war, I'm not going to win this battle. God has made me a shepherd. I'm going to take my staff, I'm going to take my stones, I'm going to take my sword, like I know who I am, and I'm going to approach the battle who I am in God, who God has made me to be, knowing God is with me. David takes off his war clothes, gets his staff, the stones. He even goes up to Goliath's face in the battle, and he says, I'm going to defeat you. Just want to let you know, just want to give you a warning. I'm going to defeat you so that all the earth may know there's a God in Israel. David knew what he was fighting for, I think, which also helps in our confidence, right? I know what I'm doing this for. I'm not doing this just to get a degree. I'm not doing this just to get it over with. I'm doing this because this is going to help me be who God is making me to be, right? Doing my schoolwork for God is going to help me to be who God is making me to be. And on the battlefield, it even says David runs to meet Goliath. He runs to meet him, and immediately, first blow, knocks him in the forehead. Goliath goes down. He's dead. And again, it'll say, I think it's in verse 50, he killed him, and there was not even a sword in David's hand. So, the rules of war don't apply to me. I know who I am. I defeated Goliath. Now, later, he will take Goliath's sword and chop his head off, but that's not part of the story that we're talking about. David didn't need to do what other people were doing, right? He had his own system. He knew who he was in God. He knew who God was making him to be. He lived into the reality of that. So I think a lot of our discussion about our identity as a student is really connected to our discussion as our identity as a disciple. David knew who he was and what he was about. And that made a difference for him. Here's something we didn't talk about, we didn't read, but you might like to know. Is that in the chapter before this, the prophet Samuel anointed David as king. King Saul is king right now. And Samuel got a word from the Lord that he needed to go find David and anoint him as king. But at the time of this battle, no one really knows that. Only David knows that. David wasn't taking a break from the reality of his kingship in God just because he was a boy, or just because he was a shepherd, or just because he was an intern with the king. Just because he had he was in a different phase of life didn't change the fact that he was anointed as a king. He had kingship in God. Much in the same way, I think that people try to tell us, as students, the lie that your life hasn't started yet, right? We're waiting to start our life. Even the way people ask us questions, like, what are you doing after this? As if the work I did today didn't matter. Like, I am in school, I'm a student, I'm doing really well, thank you for not asking. It's always they want to talk about the future as if this preparation stage is just something you need to get over. Your life has started now. You are a full, 100% active, living, breathing person participating in the world and changing the world today, right now. It's not something that happens when you graduate, or when you get to high school, or when you get to college. You're constantly going to be getting to the next thing. Right? When you're a single person, you'll be waiting to get into a relationship. And when you're in a relationship, then you'll be getting married. And then you don't have children, then you'll be getting, there's always going to be a next thing happening. So you're a full human person. You're living your real life right now. So live your life right with integrity and with power that God has given you right now. Ask God, who am I? Like, who are you making me to be? What are my gifts? And how do I use them? How do I live into that reality confidently? Like Gladwell said, being successful in school, fighting whatever battle you've got in school, whether that's a big project or maybe a really tough, friend drama that's going on, a family drama that's going on, whatever those battles are or Goliaths are in your life, it's not about being big enough or being strong enough or being smart enough to overpower those things. And it's also not even really about playing by everyone else's rules to overpower those things. It's about hearing and listening to the Holy Spirit and giving the effort to say, I know God is with me. And I know that God is doing great things with me and through me and for me. God's power is greater than any of the Goliaths in our life. And so who am I as a student? I'm different, and that's okay. And I'm confident, and that's okay. And I'm courageous in deciding I'm not going to kind of follow what everyone else is doing. And that's okay. And in the midst of stress and difficulty, because those things will come, we can't get rid of those things. And what 2020 has taught me is that, maybe it's better for it. We really think a good life is all about removing all hardship and suffering. But I have found the most beautiful moments in this past year when I just kind of sat down and let someone cry with me. And I just received that. They just had something really awful going on in their life, and they just told me about it, and I just received it. I didn't have any advice to offer. I didn't have anything else to do. We were in a stressful moment. We just kind of sat in that stressful moment together and prayed about it. And we are better friends for it. We're better people for it. So it's not all about making sure nothing bad happens, but the confidence of knowing God helped me in the battle yesterday, so God's helping me in the battle tomorrow. Right? And so it is as a student. Right? So it is as a student. Don't be discouraged. I'll end with this. I was talking with Miss Shelley the other day, and we were praying together. And she, in her prayer, and I think not realizing how impactful this was, but she prayed over me, may we work out of rest and not for rest. Do you get that? Let me say that again. May we work out of rest and not just for rest. I think we'll talk a little bit about that next week. I pray that for you as well. Let's close in prayer together. God, we are so grateful and thankful that you see us and you know our names. And even when things are stressful at school, whether that's our relationships and friendships with each other or with teachers, or that's the heavy burden of academic work or extracurricular activities, it's good news, God, that you are making us into something really special and that we get to start that life now. I don't have to wait for the future to figure out all of those things. I can start serving you in a really bold and meaningful way. God, we're so glad that you meet us in really the hardest places and most stressful places of our lives and can bring us joy in all of those things when we look to you and find our confidence and rest in you. And so God, I pray over my friends that they would do hard and meaningful work and would do it well, but would do it out of the rest they find in you and not feeling like they're working up and having to work like crazy for just a few moments or seconds of rest and not finding joy in what you're showing them and growing in them during their academic studies. God, we love you and just confess, repent, and kind of leave all of our burdens at your feet and ask that you would help us to see you moving and working in our lives this week. In your name we pray. Amen. End scene. The end.